day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney and the current chair of the Mississippi Republican Party. Chairman Hurst, good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you, Gerard. I wish I could say hump day like Rhino. That's impressive.
Well, this time last week and a couple of days even prior to that, it was a little frigid in our world, wasn't it?
We were defrosting, I would say, thawing back out from being in the D.C. swamp.
That was brutal, cold, but wow, magnificent proceedings and event, just a big day for America. I thought the president's inauguration speech was succinct, direct, to the point. I think reflected what people wanted to hear, and he's wasted no time getting to work.
My head is still spinning with all the executive orders. Most presidents, they define themselves by the first 100 days in office. Yeah. This president defines himself by the first 100 hours in office. And you felt it when we were in D.C. I mean, the energy level, the people on the street, the excitement, the enthusiasm, passion. I mean, America's back. Yeah. I mean, it's wonderful to see. And his inaugural speech, I thought he blew it out of the water.
Yeah, I did too.
I thought it was great.
And it's not that there was anything revelational or ground shaking. It was just common sense stuff. Right. We're going back to common sense, and we're going to get rid of the craziness. Is basically the message.
Shocker of an idea. Let's just go back to common sense. If we just go back to first principles, and he talked about it, the golden age of America is back. Yeah. He began the speech with that. He ended the speech with that, and that's what we want to hear. Yeah. That's the inspirational message that we expect from our president. It's not someone bumbling around, can't find his words. I mean, this guy, he's got an imperative. I think he's a changed man after the assassination attempts.
I agree.
mean, he is on a mission, and he's not wasting any time, which is, again, is wonderful to see, and it's got to be wonderful for the world to see that America's back. That beacon of freedom and liberty and hope is out there.
And the world, as you know, is taking note. They're paying attention. And this is what we want, because it felt like during the prior administration, and really it all kind of got traction and became trendy during the Obama administration, where it was always America second, sometimes even last.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not the way it should be. And what President Trump understands, and I think you could attribute that to his business background, is how to negotiate from a point of leverage and power and might. This is the mightiest nation on the planet. Let's capitalize on it.
And we're capitalizing for the right reasons. Yeah. We're not capitalizing for ourselves. We're capitalizing because this is a basic God-given right of life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. Those are things that we should be advocating for. And unfortunately for the president of Colombia, he got on the wrong end of that big stick. President Trump doesn't speak softly and carry a big stick. He speaks loudly and carries that big stick, which is great for our country.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats, of course, were critical of the president because he's been playing golf. The guy is cutting deals with Colombia from the golf course. Totally reversed that situation between swings.
Yeah, and look at the executive orders that he has put into place. Look at the number of illegal aliens that have been arrested in the first week. He's done more in the first week than the Biden administration did in 4 years.
Yeah.
And so, goodness gracious, give the guy a break. Let him play a round of golf. I mean, you guys, it might give the Democrats a little time to catch up, So, no, it's exciting to see, and it's an exciting time to be not only an American but a Republican, to be behind this president, behind this party. We've got the House, we've got the Senate. We have Senator Wicker chairing the Armed Services Committee now. We have Senator Hyde-Smith in very powerful positions and close to the president. Mississippi's in a good spot, and not to even mention our congressmen, which are doing great things in the House. 3 of them, at least. One of them has to get a presidential pardon because we don't know what crimes he committed, but he's begging the President Biden on his way to get a presidential pardon. So we've got a lot to be proud of here in Mississippi, but definitely Benny Thompson's not one of them. He's a disgrace to our state.
Well, we just called him out for voting with many other Democrats in the House against the Laken-Riley Act. I mean, what rational person votes against that?
How can you vote? How can you be a human being? I don't care what you are politically. I don't care what you are, your skin color. I don't care who you are, what you believe. How can you vote against deporting and punishing those who not only are here illegally but harm our fellow citizens. That's absolutely insane.
Or just detaining them.
Yes.
You committed a crime here. We're going to keep you until such time as you have your trial, your hearing, whatever the legal proceedings are. We don't want you on the streets. This murder could have been prevented if this law had been in place. That was the catalyst for it.
Frankly, Gerard, this murder could have been prevented if the law had been forced.
That's true.
I mean, I don't think the issue is we don't have enough laws on the books. I think the issue is that the past administration refused to do what our elected representatives passed and enacted into law and were signed by the president. They refused to enforce our laws.
Totally agree.
And today we see that. In the past week, we see President Trump enforcing our laws again. We see the men and women of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol doing their jobs. And I would venture to say I have a lot of friends in those federal agencies. They are excited when they are called upon the president to actually do their jobs again. In the Democratic administrations, when they're sitting, when they're told not to do their jobs, that's when they're at their lowest. So this is an exciting time, again, not just for Mississippi, but for our country.
Well, we'll talk about that, Mike, because you have experience in this exact area as an attorney. What obligation does our country have to provide due process to an illegal alien?
Yeah, I think the way the president is doing it, if you come to our country illegally, we deport you. If you have if the American people through their representatives have put a process into place, say for asylum or for refugee status, nothing says you get to wait here in America for that to be determined.
That was the Remain in Mexico policy, right?
And that's what Trump has put back into place, and that's the way it should be.
Sure.
I mean, the presumption is you have to prove these things. It's not a given, and you should be proving those things not in America, but you should be proving those things overseas.
Well, I think it's pretty clear during the last 4 years, the Biden administration, weren't we a bit lax with the whole asylum deal?
Oh my God, no! I don't think it was lax. I don't think it was negligence. I think it was intentional. I think it was absolutely intentional what they did, opening up the borders, as some say, lax with the asylum and the refugee status. No, I think that was absolutely an opportunity that the Dems thought they had to bring all these illegal aliens into our country, to sign them up for amnesty, and all of a sudden you have a supermajority voting for Democrats because they have allowed them into this country illegally.
Unbelievable.
Frankly, they've allowed them to invade our country and take over our country just because the Democrats want to remain in power.
It doesn't get discussed a lot, but obviously this consumes lots of resources, lots of cycles dealing with this issue. It was a problem they created that now we're having to invest time and money and assets and resources in to mitigate,
to clean
and to
up the
eliminate.
mess.
We should be worried about how do we grow our economy and create more economic opportunity and prosperity.
Right. I mean, and let's think about this. Had the Democrats not stymied and blocked President Trump's many attempts to try to build that southern wall, to try to keep up a border, an actual border. If you don't have a border, Gerard, you don't have a country.
Sure.
And had Trump been successful, had he not been stymied by the Democratic Congress, I think they would have had a much, much tougher time during the Biden administration to allow all these illegal aliens in our country.
We would have had a natural barrier there, so to speak, and we wouldn't have all these crossings. But you've noticed, I know, that in Tom Homan, who Mr. Trump tapped to lead this effort, is awesome. Yeah. And he's just a no-nonsense, objective guy. He doesn't introduce politics or emotion into the issues, but
it's black and white.
He reported yesterday we went from days we had not so long ago where 10,000 would be crossing over, and now it's fewer than 100.
Right. Yeah.
And
I met Tom back when I was United States Attorney. I taught on immigration enforcement and immigration laws at the basically what we call the baby prosecutor school for federal prosecutors within DOJ. And I met Tom at one of these conferences where we were both speaking and teaching. And to your point, he's just a by the book guy.
Yeah,
he's an old cop.
And that's what you want.
And that's what
position.
we want. That's exactly what we want. Here's the law. We're going to enforce the law. And there's no politics involved. That's what we want from our cops. That's what we want from our justice system. And to see President Trump sign that executive order saying no more weaponization of our justice system, that should make every American happy.
But there's some who aren't happy with that, as you know.
You know.
We got a break. If you can hang around,
Absolutely.
we keep talking about everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks.
I don't know if we have enough time, but
Mike Hurst, chairman of the Mississippi GOP, is in the Element Well studio. We're coming. Well studio, Mike Hurst, former U.S. attorney and chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party, is our guest. Mr. Chairman, you know, one thing that's got across your mind, and I know it does, and you alluded to it somewhat in our last segment, it's a pretty good time to be a Republican in the state and in the country.
it's always a good time to be a Republican, Gerard. Not just now, it's always. No, it's a great time. You know, before the inauguration last week, myself, our executive director of the party, Rance Bilbo, Leslie Davis, who is our new committee woman from Mississippi for the RNC, and Frank Bordeaux, our committee man, we traveled to D.C. early to attend the RNC's winter meeting. And I will tell you, a lot of great things happened at that meeting, but one of the best things for Mississippi was Frank Bordeaux, our former chairman and now our committee man, was elected chairman of the Rules Committee for all of the RNC.
Okay.
Huge deal, huge issue. He will help shape the rules packages, everything that we at the RNC do. He will help shape that over the next 4 years. So that's a great thing for Mississippi and another shining moment for the Republican Party.
It just felt like even when we were in Washington, I think I shared with you that I was able to have coffee with Joel and Natasha, frequent guests on the program.
Right.
They're the host of America's Roundtable Radio, and they noted that what was just starkly different from the prior cycle was that you're seeing Republicans. You could tell, obviously, by their attire. We had a lot of MAGA merchandise and clothing being worn.
A lot of red hats up there. That's right.
They said that the last inauguration cycle for Joe Biden, the place was just not
very somber, very down. Yeah,
didn't see any Republicans
which
out.
reflected the Biden administration.
Well, sure it did. No doubt about it. But they were just kind of lauding the fact that we actually have more of a presence here in the city, which I think does resonate across the entire
country. A lot of Mississippians went to the inauguration, a lot of excitement. Our senators are playing a major role in these nominations that President Trump has put up. One of the first nominees that got through was Peter Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, going through Senator Roger Wicker's Armed Services Committee. Senator Hyde Smith had been considered, widely reported, had been considered for agricultural secretary. Mm-hmm. So we Mississippians, our state is really punching above our weight. And I think that goes back to what, our founding fathers of the Mississippi Republican Party really laid the foundation for us to be here today.
No doubt.
And we're trying to build upon that. We're trying to really build the party back up to its heyday. But we're also focusing on what I would consider traditional blocking and tackling of the party. We're getting back to the roots of what we were supposed to do, which is help our mayoral candidates, help our county supervisor candidates, help with local races that maybe, we've done a great job on the statewide races, on the regional races. We have supermajorities in the House and the Senate, but we have to make sure we get back and help the local races where, traditionally a lot of voters just instinctively voted Democrat because that's what they always had done. Yeah. So we've got to remind them of our principles. I would encourage all of your listeners to go to msgop.org, look at our platform. Those are the principles that we stand by as Republicans. And I would encourage all of our elected officials to remind them this is what we Republicans believe. This is what we expect when we pass policy, and this is what we expect when people sign up as a Republican and run for office.
That's a good point. Yeah, that is the roadmap for the party. And everyone should adhere to that.
Absolutely.
That carries the Republican badge.
And all your listeners, Friday is the deadline to qualify for mayor of your small town. So if you believe in these principles that we as Republicans believe in, man, I encourage you to sign up and get out there, put that R beside your name, and let's get after it.
The primary, April 1, I believe, right?
That's
right. So you got a couple of months there to get out and campaign, run for office at the local level. I've seen many announcements of some really good people.
Absolutely.
That are running for mayor, alderman, city council, and so forth.
Yeah. And again, we've done well in the state as Republicans, but we can't rest on that success. We can't rest on our laurels. And we know the Democrats are coming after our mayors. They're coming after our local elected officials. And so we have to double down. Yes, we had an historic win last year with re-electing President Trump. And we should pat ourselves on the back for about 30 minutes. But we've got to get back to work, and we've got to make sure these mayoral candidates and the other candidates are elected come April and come June.
Mike, in your role as chair of the Mississippi GOP, What sort of discussions have you had with your peers that run the party in other states?
Yeah, it's really run the gamut. I mean, chairmen of state Republican parties are just like any other leaders of other organizations. I mean, it varies depending on the state. Rhode Island's obviously a lot different from Georgia. Yeah. Guam is a lot different from Alabama. But all of them, we all have the real belief in those principles that I mentioned, the platform that we have, and that's wonderful to see when you come together. Although you have varied backgrounds and you have very varied experiences growing up, we all come together around this platform and around these principles as to why we are Republicans. Yeah, we need to remind people of that. We need to remind people that we were founded as the party of Lincoln. We need to remind people, especially our brothers and sisters who think they're Democrats, but when you start looking at the principles we believe in, I think we will convince a lot of men and women that they are really Republican.
That's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trump showed us that. Trump got more votes, and he mentioned this in his inaugural speech. He said the Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, they turned out in droves and voted for Trump more than any other Republican presidential candidate in history. And we need to capitalize on that, and we need to, frankly, we need to sit across the table from them and talk with them, and just explain to them our principles, and frankly show them why they're better off voting for Republicans than they are Democrats.
That's a great point. He actually thanked them directly in his inauguration speech,
and he said, "I'm not going to forget you, and we're going to take care of you."
And I believe that, and I think we're already seeing that. But that's a great point you make, Mike. If we could just sit down and have a productive and a cordial, respectful conversation, we can do that.
Absolutely.
With the folks on the other side of the aisle and hear their concerns, but also share with them our principles, our beliefs, and then relate that to how that improves the quality of life, more importantly.
That's right.
Not just this is what we stand for, but there's a reason why we stand for this.
Right.
They're underlying foundational principles that drive better outcomes for society, and that's what we're really all about.
Yep.
I think it's great. Well, the party is strong. Hard to believe, but year and a half, we got to go back and vote for members of the U.S. House. I mean, the campaigning, as you know, not underway, I guess, in earnest yet, but 6 months or so, they'll be talking about it again. It's important that we get results for the American people so they see fit to ensure we retain that ever so slim majority now, but perhaps even expand our majority in the House and keep it in the Senate.
Right. And don't forget the Senate as well. I mean, Senator Hyde Smith is up for re-election next year.
That's true. Absolutely.
We have the perennial Democratic candidate Ty Pinkins running again. I think he runs every few months for something, but she does an incredible job. Senator Wicker does an incredible job. Our congressmen do an incredible job for our state, and you're right. We cannot squander the next 18, 20 months to make sure this administration, this Senate, this House do what the American people put them in there to do. And that's to capitalize on our principles as Republicans and make our country safer, make it more prosperous, and make it better for future generations. And if we do that, we'll be rewarded in 2026. Totally agree. And we'll get 2 more years to continue to do that good work.
Well, you may not want to comment on policy, but I've talked to you about this and done my best to impress upon our delegation and even others. We got to get these tax cuts in place, man, and extend it because the clock is ticking on that.
That's right. And it's said often, good policy is good politics. And I believe that wholeheartedly when it comes to our principles as Republicans. And I view our role as the Mississippi Republican Party. Our role is to educate voters, to recruit candidates, and to elect Republicans. And when people ask me about policy, absolutely I'm interested in policy. But all of my policy preferences are going to come back to this platform. It's going to come back to these principles that we believe.
Well, no doubt about that. And of course, low taxation and collecting the revenues that we only need to operate the constitutionally appropriate functions of government, I think is consistent with our values and principles. Man, has that ever gone off the rails? Good grief.
That's right.
And
that's right.
The Doge team, Senator Joni Ernst has been very involved with them in the Senate, and they've uncovered lots of opportunity. It's a target-rich environment, some of the crazy spending that's been going on, and we've got to get back to just those appropriate functions of government.
Yeah, that's right. Only. I think it was Reagan that said something to the effect of, government programs the only thing that only expands, only grows large larger. It never contracts. It never gets rid of itself. I guess I could give a shout out to Commissioner Cheney trying to get rid of his elected position as Commissioner of Insurance, but especially on the federal level, and I've seen it firsthand. Once you create a federal program, I mean, it's almost takes an act of God to get rid of it.
Yeah, they just don't die.
No.
And they're perpetual, immortal.
That's right.
So, Mike Hurst, chairman of the Mississippi GOP, former U.S. attorney as well, has been our guest in the Element Well studio. Always good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, too. Thanks for the time.
You bet. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio after these messages.